Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you all. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome to our 6th annual meeting. I want to thank all of you for being here, our sponsors who make this possible, Sheraton for hosting us again. Particularly in this difficult economic time, I appreciate the choice that every one of you made to come here and to participate. Since 2005, the CGI has evolved in many ways. One of the most important things that has happened is that so many people have met here and formed different alliances that we now essentially operate all year long. We have a full-time commitments office where we help people all year long to prepare commitments for the coming meeting. And now we have action networks focused on issues that people particularly care about, whether it's Haiti, the empowerment of women and girls, building a new energy economy, cancer in the developing world. These things, they change from year to year, but the people who are part of the action networks, many of whom are in this audience today, I want to thank you for the year-round work that you have done. At this year's meeting, we're going to try a few other things as well. We will have some brief keynote talks later today about the 4 global challenges that we are dealing with. And we have a group of people who weren't here last year, our CGI lead group, a select group of younger people in their 20s and 30s that are making a big difference, who are meeting and working together about what they can do to reach people in their age groups around the world to take on a lot of these challenges. President and Mrs. Obama will join us for our closing session on Thursday. And Thursday night, we'll be awarding 4 deserving people our Global Citizenship Award. So I hope all of you will stay through to the end Thursday night. I think you'll enjoy that. This week, more than 1,300 of you are here. We have 67 present and former heads of state or government, 600 business leaders, 500 directors of non-governmental organizations, and of course, a variety of other people with other interests and backgrounds from 90 countries on 6 continents, all committed to work together to make commitments that are specific, measurable, and new. By the start of our meeting, our members had already made 291 new commitments valued at $6 billion. We expect that number will grow over the next 3 days and in the months to follow as these commitments develop from the conversations and interactions you have with one another. We are proud that just through our CGI year-round networks, we have 150 new partnerships this year alone already formed. I always like to begin our meetings by reminding us of where we left off. At the end of last year's meeting, we had more than 1,700 commitments over the history of CGI made by thousands and thousands of people working together that over a decade will be worth $57 billion and that already have had a positive impact on the lives of 220 million people in 170 countries. Today's commitments will raise those numbers to 1,946 commitments valued at $60 billion plus that, because some of them are already underway, have already impacted 296 million lives. More than 16 million women and girls have had access to empowerment initiatives. 50 million children have been given access to more education. 75 million people have received better maternal and child health. More than 90 million acres of forests have been protected or restored. Enough clean energy through the energy initiatives of people here has been generated to power more than 400,000 homes permanently. 20 million people have more access to safe water $10 million more to microcredit, $1.75 billion has been pledged to small and medium-sized enterprises in developing countries, to people who would otherwise have no access to such credit. When Haiti was hit by a series of hurricanes in 2008, CGI members organized a group to support them and pledged more than $145 million in projects to help the country build back from what then seemed devastating. They lost 15% of their annual GDP in 4 hurricanes. Then came the earthquake, which took out 70% of the GDP, hitting 35% of the population and 33% of the landmass. After that, the business leaders, and I want to thank particularly Dennis O'Brien at Digicel and a number of others of you who have been very faithful on this, who have been driving this. But the business leaders formed an action network to meet year-round. And they have worked in alignment with the Haiti Reconstruction Commission, which I'm honored to co-chair with the Prime Minister of Haiti, Jean-Marc Bellerive, whom all of you will see in the course of this. And they've made some more commitments, which you will hear about. So that's where we are. I hope when we come out of this meeting, every one of you will have a clearer idea about how you can best use your resources in this climate to promote more economic growth in all the countries represented here, including in the United States. In case you hadn't noticed, we need it too. And this is really important, whether it's what I think is our best opportunity, building a new clean energy economy by changing the way we produce and consume energy, or investing more in agriculture and sustainable food systems, or empowering more women and educating more girls, reducing the burdens of illness and dirty water, increasing access to education. Whatever it is, I hope you will have an idea of what is most needed in the places you care most about on the economy. There are clearly things that we can do in cooperation with the private sector and with governments to accelerate economic growth across the globe. The second thing is, I hope we'll have a clearer idea about how we should both respond to natural disasters or man-made disasters and what we can do to prevent them. We don't yet have the figures on this decade, I don't believe, but in the previous decade, insurance payments for natural disasters were 3 times what they had ever been in any previous decade. And we're all now living in the aftermath of what happened in Haiti and what happened in Pakistan. We all remember the Indian Ocean tsunami just 5 years ago. We've been through a lot of these gripping natural disasters, and we had the horrible Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf Coast, and now they had the biggest oil spill in American history. The Gulf Coast in America has been hit by everything but a plague of locusts. We're waiting for it to come in. And I say that only half jokingly. There is every reason to believe that the incidence of economically devastating natural disasters will accelerate around the world with the changing of the climate. I don't think you can attribute the earthquakes to climate change because they're due to tectonic shifts in the Earth's planet, and at least as far as I understand it, tend to follow much longer-term pattern changes. But all these other things, if you look at the last 20 years, it's obvious that these things are going to accelerate, and all of us need to be better prepared to know how we're going to deal with these things if they occur, whether we can prevent them or at least minimize their impact. And finally, I'd ask you, as I always do every year, to think about what more I and we could do to engage people who are not in this room. Most of you who've been here before know that we webcast this now, and we encourage people in every nation, on every continent, who could never afford to pay to come here or fly to come here who don't have much money but who have good ideas to make their own commitments over the internet and to participate. And we will try to help give them support, information, contacts, networks. I believe so strongly that the definition of good citizenship in the 21st century must include some sort of activity like this, going beyond voting, obeying the law, paying your taxes, getting a good education if you're young, and working hard if you're no longer young. I just believe the world is so interdependent, and the struggle of the 21st century will be a complicated, ongoing blizzard of conflicts between the positive and negative forces of interdependence. And the limits to what the private sector can produce and the government can provide are everywhere so evident that all of us are going to have to do more to step into the breach, to fill the gaps and figure out how to do things faster, less expensively, and better, and to keep the experimentation and change pace going. So obviously, even though I think you're all immensely talented, it cannot be that all the people we need working in the way we came here to work are in this room today. We need to constantly be thinking about how we can get more people back home to do it. There are also many people here who come from conflict areas where you're having political fights. And I find that the more people you can get working together on specific projects that benefit real people, the easier it is to move beyond conflict to cooperation. And there are a lot of you know more about that than I do, but I hope you will all be thinking about that. What can we do to promote more economic growth? What can we do to deal with the natural disaster phenomenon? What can we do to get more people involved in our common endeavors? Now, let's get on with the show. We begin with 3 new commitments involved in the phenomenon I just discussed, the natural disasters. Then we will have a progress report on a commitment from last year, because we try to keep up and let you all know what happens when people begin to keep their commitments. And then we'll have a new mega commitment announced by the former president of Ireland and great human rights activist Mary Robinson. Then we'll have the opening panel. So let me begin with new commitment announcements. The first involves Haiti. I would like to invite to the stage Nancy Dorsonville, representing AmeriCares, David Crane of NRG Energy, Monique Rocourt-Martinez of ISPAN, Daniel Snitzer of EarthSpark International. So far this year, CGI members have made commitments worth $224 million to help the people of Haiti recover after their devastating earthquake. And we're going to have a special session on Haiti, so I won't say much about it. But let me just give you one example. In the blink of an eye, when the earthquake hit, in the center of the capital, 17% of the national workforce was killed, the government workforce. So the poorest country in our region, with limited government capacity, lost 17% of its governing, literally its physical capacity in terms of human people in the blink of an eye. And we have millions of tons of rubble to remove. We have lots of work to do. But the reason these commitments are so important is this. The international community has pledged about $10 billion over the next decade. There will be about 10 million people in Haiti. That's about $100 a person a year. That's not enough to rebuild a country whose per capita income was under $1,000 before the earthquake, where 75% of the people lived on less than $2 a day, and 85% of the people had no access to electricity before the quake. We have to do this with private initiative. We have to build a private economy. And we have to deal with the social challenges of the country through public and private initiatives. So these commitments are especially important. So let me just describe briefly what is being done here. AmeriCares and its partner organizations have committed to create safe spaces that offer social, health, and financial literacy services for adolescent girls. Working with 80 Haitian peer mentors, the initiative will break the cycle of poverty for 1,000 girls between the ages of 10 and 19 and help NGOs establish girl-centered programming. This is a huge deal. We fight every single day in these camps where more than 1 million people are living under tents and tarps against sexually motivated violence against not only grown women, but children. And the Bangladeshis have sent us an all-female security force to the UN force. They've done a great job down there. We're making progress, but it is a huge problem. So this work by AmeriCares and its partners is deeply appreciated. NRG Energy commits to invest $1 million to install solar panels to power water pumps, schools, and street lighting in the municipality of Bukan. Working with the Solar Electric Light Fund, thanks to an introduction through CGI, NRG will show that solar energy can provide affordable and reliable electricity. This is really important. Electricity in the Caribbean is the most expensive on earth. Electricity in Haiti was averaged 35 cents a kilowatt hour. If we can take it to 17, which we easily can by increasing the solar and wind capacity, we'll be able to get a lot of jobs there, but it means we need to have local solar capacity hooking up as many buildings as possible, so that's not a drain on what we want to use to build industrial investment. So I'm very grateful to NRG. Thank you. You've been great on this from start to finish. This is just the beginning. But any of you interested in this, want to know about the Haiti energy scene, the Dominicans have just agreed to have their electric system and grid hooked up with the Haitians. Anybody who understands the last 200 years of history will find this astonishing. It is wonderful how they are working together. And we can build them a whole clean, independent energy future, but we have to have not just big wind energy and centralized feed into the grid. We've got to have localized solar or we'll never get it done. This is the beginning of something really big. Thank you. ISPON commits to creating a multimedia curriculum on Haiti's rich natural heritage for children between the ages of 6 and 12. This initiative will empower future leaders of Haiti by instilling them a sense of national identity. This is really important. A lot of the greatest cultural heritage of Haiti was wrecked, totally destroyed, or severely damaged in this quake. They have, for those of you who've ever been there, they have an incredibly unique history and culture which needs to be preserved and which children need to be able to hold on to through the difficult next couple of years while we're rebuilding. I thank you very much. And EarthSpark International is committed to reduce Haitians' reliance on conventional fuels by building 2 solar-powered microgrids and opening 5 locally owned stores selling energy-efficient appliances like alternative fuel cook stoves. There are a lot of things going on in Haiti that could be accelerated with connectors like these microgrids, so we thank them very much. So these are our first commitments. Let's give them all a big hand. The next set of commitments involves Pakistan. So I would like to invite to the stage Roshana Zafar of Cash Foundation, Dominic McSorley of Concern Worldwide, Alexandra Stanton of ACS Energy Advisors, and one of our panelists in just a moment, Eric Schmidt of Google. More than 20 million people have been devastated by the impact of the flood in Pakistan. The floods destroyed roads, bridges, homes, lands, and hospitals. Access to clean water is severely limited. And Pakistan is facing a public health emergency of drastic proportions. Let me say, whenever you have anything like this, the first thing you have to worry about is waterborne illnesses. Outbreaks of cholera, dysentery, diarrhea. And when people start dying, almost all of them will be 6 years old or younger. So I want to thank everybody who's concerned about that. Our CGI members are making commitments that address immediate needs, including clean water, food, and the long-term challenges of creating jobs, rebuilding infrastructure, and spurring a sustainable recovery. The Cash Foundation commits to establish a fund for the rehabilitation of 10 communities severely affected by the flood, to improve livelihoods, especially those of women, through cash grants and microfinance, and to support the construction of clean water infrastructure in schools. Concern Worldwide, U.S. will meet the emergency needs of more than 588,000 of the most vulnerable people in KPK, Balochistan, Punjab, and Sindh provinces, including food, aid for farmers, and funding for infrastructure. To establish long-term water and energy infrastructure, ACS Energy Advisors, partnering with World Water and Solar Technologies, will donate solar-powered water purification machines, which also serve as energy-efficient generators to provide clean drinking water. Google will give $1 million to flood relief efforts and work to develop new technologies to aid in this and future humanitarian crises, to enhance tools including the person finder that they helped to develop in Haiti, which saved God knows how many lives. This is a big deal. We need this everywhere. And also helped a lot in Chile. So all of these things are a response, ours as a group, to what happened in Pakistan. I know the world economy is in trouble. I know they're further away than Haiti. But 20 million people is a big blow. And I hope that the rest of us will not forget what we might be able to do, even as we applaud what they're doing. Let's give them a big hand. Now, our last commitment involves the Gulf Coast. And I want to ask Vicki Spruill of the Ocean Conservancy and Philippe Cousteau Jr. of Earth Echo International to come to the stage. Even before the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded in April, the Gulf Coast was facing a host of challenges, among them the aftermath of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the depletion of natural resources, and a turbulent economic climate. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but when Katrina hit, all of you should know that if the wetlands in South Louisiana had been in the same condition they were in, according to a finding by the American scientific authorities of our government, if they'd been in the same condition they were in 30 years before, the water coming up that canal would have been going less than half as fast, and 90% of the damage would have been avoided. In fact, the gate might not have broken at all, and virtually nothing might have happened. A great American city was destroyed in part because its protective wetlands were first destroyed. The oil spill compounded the pre-existing environmental and economic issues, threatened the livelihoods of thousands of people who rely on the Gulf for income from tourism, fishing, and other industries. We may not know the full extent of this for many years, and Mother Nature may rebound better than we had originally thought. But regardless, the next two commitments from members of the CGI Gulf Coast Action Network, formed in the wake of the spill, show a creative approach that in any case will improve the lives of people in the region. The Ocean Conservancy commits to establish a Gulf Restoration Center in Louisiana, to tap into a network of volunteers to support coastal cleanup and long-term recovery, to work with scientists to assess the damage to the Gulf and engage all the stakeholders to ensure that recovery activities are effective and comprehensive, and advocate a strong national oceans policy. Earth Echo International commits to empower young people in the Gulf states through a new citizen journalism initiative in collaboration with the Wallace Global Fund to provide 1,000 young people between the ages of 11 and 18 with the training and resources to cover local environmental challenges. The initiative also will develop and maintain a multimedia website to give these young journalists an outlet for their stories and keep concern for this issue alive. Good for them. Let's give them a hand. We'll get you one. Now, I want to invite Malika Dutt of Breakthrough to the stage to give a progress report on a commitment made back in 2006. Let me bring her up by saying that before we had a separate section on women and girls, she was concerned that 1 in 5 women in the world will be a victim of rape or attempted rape at some point in their lifetime. 1 in 3 will have been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused. The majority of young people who never darken a schoolhouse door are girls. She was on this a long time before it became a priority of CGI. She made a commitment, and I would like for her to report on it. Malika.
We have to go from the tall to the short. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everybody. I'm so honored to be able to report on Breakthrough's 2006 commitment to reduce the twin pandemics of violence against women and HIV/AIDS. And of course, I would like to salute you, Mr. President, and the entire CGI team for making the empowerment of women and girls a priority this year. As we all know now, domestic violence and HIV/AIDS are very closely linked. Married Indian women who experience both physical and sexual violence demonstrate an HIV infection rate that is a higher prevalence of 4 times more than women who do not experience violence. 4 years ago, we committed to reduce HIV/AIDS and gender-based violence in India through cutting-edge, compelling campaigns. We wanted to initiate public dialogue, change attitudes, and change behavior so that we could reduce human rights violations like domestic violence, HIV infections within marriage, and homelessness faced by HIV-positive women. Our most recent campaign, Bell Bajao, or Ring the Bell, calls on men and boys to become partners in breaking the cycle of violence against women. Across the country, we've been delighted to gather stories of men and women who are interrupting violence in the home next door by ringing the doorbell when they hear abuse. We've reached 124 million people so far in India alone, and recently won a Cannes Lion at the International Advertising Agency Awards. Along with our mass media work, we train young people and community leaders to become rights advocates, to become change agents in their communities. We've trained more than 75,000 rights advocates, and they've reached another 2 million people at the grassroots level. We've achieved a 49% increase in awareness of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act and a 15% increase in access to services for battered women. Building on the extraordinary success of Bell Bajao in India, we are so delighted to announce our 2010 Clinton Global Initiative commitment. We're going global. Bell Bajao Global Campaign is being launched right now at this instant. And we are so pleased that the UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, is our first global champion. We really hope, Mr. President, that yourself and other male leaders in this room will join us in Bell Bajao. We hope to galvanize men and boys from around the world, across all walks of life, to partner with us to end this cycle of violence against women. I'd like to close by paraphrasing one of my sheroes, Eleanor Roosevelt. As she so eloquently said, where, after all, do human rights begin? They begin at home. They begin with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Malika. Thank you for your new commitment and for asking the rest of us to join. Now, I want to invite to the stage the former president of Ireland and great international human rights activist, Mary Robinson, to announce a mega commitment. In the last few years, we have worked harder and harder to get more and more groups and individuals together around specific commitments so they could leverage each other's strength and have a bigger impact on more people. The first one is the one that Mary will introduce now. Thank you.
Mr. President, I've got a sexy voice. I've got a bad common cold. I'm delighted to announce this particular commitment because I've been an admirer for a long time of waste pickers worldwide. And this is, as you said, a mega commitment. So listen up. Every second, 52 tons of trash are deposited in landfills across the world. Garbage leaches toxins into our waterways, releases greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, and creates unsavory and unsafe living and working conditions. GCI members come from vastly different geographies, economies, and cultural backgrounds, but all of their communities are burdened by environmental degradation and health problems connected to trash. Issues exacerbated for impoverished populations and women who make up the majority of waste scavengers or pickers worldwide. So, Mr. President, I'm very pleased to honor the following members who are addressing this critical issue. First, I'd like to introduce John Williams of HER Engineering. With his leadership, members of CGI's Rethinking Waste Action Network have come together to turn waste into income, resources, and energy. I would also like to introduce Roxanne Mankin-Kaysen of the Kaysen Family Foundation, which is launching a new web platform that will facilitate partnerships with corporations to empower waste pickers around the world, especially women. Jyoti Mapsekar of Sri Mukti Sangatana, it's not an Irish expression, will train 250 women and girls waste scavengers in India in environmental entrepreneurship. Doug Woodring of Project Kaise and Paul Gilman of Coventa Energy Corporation. Project Kaise will launch the Plastic Disclosure Project, which will require that companies report their plastic footprints. Coventa is partnering with Project Kaise to collect plastic debris from the world's oceans and turn it into a valuable project using a new waste-to-energy technology. Joseph Aldegan of the Global Network for Environment and Economic Development Research commits to convert wastewater into affordable power and environmentally safe fertilizer for low-income African farmers. And finally, but last but not least, Josira Lose Sawiris of Enhancement of Integrated Services and Waste Recycling will address Cairo's growing waste problems in low-income residential areas. And now I need the commitment. Is this the commitment?
Before they go, I want to just tell all of you something you've never thought about this. Hardly anybody comes to an event like CGI thinking they want to make a good impression, thinking about garbage. Very few people in the world get turned on by the idea that you could close landfills. But if you want to fight climate change, improve public health, find new sources of wealth for poor people, and create new entrepreneurs, the closest thing to a silver bullet in the world, in most countries, is closing all the landfills in all the cities. We had a commitment last year from an American company that has already closed a landfill in a Massachusetts town and recovered the biogas and is generating energy and lowering the cost of electricity and improving the environment and putting more people to work. But I do a lot of this work around the world through our climate change project. In almost every landfill is a gold mine, which is why so many poor people scavenge in them, because the glass, the plastic, the metal can be recycled. The food can be turned over to farmers to make organic fertilizer. And everything else can be turned into a fuel source. It can be compacted and used to generate electricity. Or you can use the organic material itself to generate methane or other biogases and use that for fuel. The point is that all over the world, in developing countries, valuable land that could be used for decent housing, it could be used for new factories, it could be used for schools, it could be used for playgrounds and recreational facilities, is being swallowed up by landfills that are basically enormous sources of wealth if they're converted, recycled, or compacted and burned for energy. It's a terrible waste and a staggering opportunity. So I was thrilled that they wanted to be the first megasource. And of course, those who are concerned about the ocean, you know about all the trash that's just wandering around in these big globs in the ocean and all the problems that presents. So if you have any interest, I would urge all of you to contact these folks or contact us if you care about what's going on at home. But every country, rich and poor, that is struggling with major landfill issues should look at those who have looked at those and seen gold mines. Or maybe the better analogy is oil wells. They're energy sources, wealth sources, and you can recover the land and give them to people who really need it for purposes that are really needed. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you. Now I want to get right into our panel, and we're going to have a few discussions with an extremely interesting panel about the shape of CGI this year, what we're talking about and how we're doing it. First, I'd like to bring to the stage the chairman of the board and the president and CEO of Proctor Gamble Company, Bob MacDonald. Procter & Gamble has been a great partner with us over the years in trying to improve the lives of people through their commitment to provide more safe and clean water and a number of our other initiatives. Their goal is to reach 5 billion consumers in the decade ahead. If they do, they'll have a lot more money to help us. Our next panelist is Melinda Gates, the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I might say, it is not only the biggest foundation in the world, thanks in no small measure to her. It is probably in so many ways the best. I had the honor of going to Africa with Bill and Melinda and listening to her talk to village people about health practices and other practices related to the treatment of AIDS and other basic health care. And they have done an amazing job of melding their access to resources with looking at real hard research data, not being driven by anything other than the facts on the ground about what people's problems are and how best to solve them. My admiration for the work they do around the world is boundless. Our third panelist I just mentioned is Eric Schmidt, the chairman of the board and CEO of Google, Inc., who has been an enormously strong supporter of much of the work our foundation does around the world. But I'm particularly grateful, as I said, because of this person search effort that Google did in Haiti. There's no telling how many people's lives were actually saved and how many people's misery was actually lessened because of the information that Google could give to a country that otherwise had no sophisticated identification system and could not have had a sophisticated disaster recovery system because of its level of income and development. And the final panelist, in my last year as president, I had the honor of spending with her in her first year, still the president of the Republic of Finland, Tarja Halonen. And the important thing for everyone else to know, if you've never been to Finland, is that President Halonen has been co-chair of the World Commission on the social dimensions of globalization. In other words, how can average people and poor people wind up ahead instead of behind in a globalized economy? She has served as a co-chair of the Council of Women World Leaders, and she heads a country that consistently finishes in the top 5 in all global rankings of the quality of education, the way the economy works, the distribution of wealth and opportunity. And it's just about the only political thing I'm going to say while you're here. I'm hoping that if we're not living in a totally evidence-free world, some of the things that she says will demonstrate that every successful country in the 21st century has both a vigorous and effective and relevant private sector and an effective government. And the NGO movement is more effective where the government works and the private sector works. And if you just take one out, as some people in America think would be a wonderful idea, it makes it even more difficult. And if you keep score in the old-fashioned way, what percentage of your people are well off and are better off, seems to me that our friends in Finland have done a pretty admirable job of dealing with the challenges and seizing the opportunities of the 21st century world, with the private sector doing what it should and the government doing what it should and supporting the development of a non-governmental movement. So I'm glad they're all here. Let's get on with the conversation.
Receive thanks when you are finished.
So, first, one of the things that we're talking about are market-based solutions. So I want to start with Bob MacDonald. Procter Gamble this year committed, listen to this, to saving at least one life every hour in the developing world by providing 2 billion liters of clean drinking water every year with these little PUR packets they have, which don't cost very much money. And I should tell you that when we started webcasting this CGI, and people who couldn't possibly afford to come here started following it on the internet, and they wished to make their own commitments all over the world. One of the most attractive things were we have the former president of Nigeria here, President Obasanjo. We had a guy from Nigeria call and say, I don't have much money. I want to buy those PUR packets. I got $5. I want it, however many I can buy. I want to buy them, and you send them to people to save their lives. So what I want to ask to you is, why do you do this? And is this just because you're good-hearted, or is it really also good for the company over the long run? And if you know, does this effort have a disproportionately positive impact on women and girls?
Well, the Proctor Gamble company has been around for 172 years, and over that time, our purpose has always been to touch and improve lives all over the world. And the people joined the company because of that purpose. 51 of the largest economies in the world are companies, they're not countries. 40% of global trade is done by companies, not countries. Companies have a role to play, and we think that role is big. So, as you said, Mr. President, we've had this program, Children's Safe Drinking Water, with these little pure packets that clean up 1 liter of water for 6 years. And over that 6 years, we've contributed 2.4 billion liters of clean water. But as you've said, today we're making a new commitment here at CGI that we will save 1 life every hour by doing 2 billion packets every year, not just 2.4 billion packets for the last 6 years. We think it's appropriate, and we think that it's good business as well as good philanthropy. And consumers around the world today, they want to know what they're buying into when they spend their dollars for products. So we think it's good for the world and good business as well.
So, in other words, big international companies that work more like Finland are going to make a lot of money, right? That's good.
Yes, sir.
That was my editorial comment, but that's essentially what he said.
That is what I said.
And your predecessor, former President Marty Atasari, he likes that. Thank you. Melinda, recently the Gates Foundation announced that it was investing $1.5 billion over the next 5 years to support women and girls, especially in the fields of maternal, newborn, and child health, family planning, and nutrition programs. This comes after your major agricultural development initiative, which placed women at the center of the strategy for agriculture in the developing world. When you started all this foundation, you first became known for your commitment to making schools better in America and dealing with AIDS around the world. How did you morph your global concerns into these last commitments? Explain it, and explain what you expect good to happen out of it.
Well, Bill and I care deeply about equality around the world. The premise of the foundation is that all lives have equal value. And when you look at what's happening with childhood deaths around the world, that is the children that die under the age of 5, there is something incredibly tangible as a world that we can do about that. The number of deaths in 1960 of children around the world under 5 who died was basically about 30 million kids. Then we got down to 12 million kids in 1990 when the Millennium Development Goals were set. We're now down to 8 million children dying every year under the age of 5, and we think that's unfathomable. And we think there's something that we and many partners in this room can do about that to halve that yet again. And we're accelerating the rate by taking things like vaccinations that we have in places like the US and the UK, getting those out to children, and also developing vaccines for which there is no market in the US. A pneumonia vaccine, for instance, or a diarrheal vaccine. Accelerating the development of those and getting them out globally is something that can literally cut that rate in half yet again. So if you look at the Millennium Development Goal that was set around childhood deaths, Millennium Development Goal number 4, we want to actively work on that. We also want to work on the maternal deaths. We still have 345,000 women a year who die basically when they're in labor. There's something we can easily do about that. And to save these lives, in some cases, costs just a few dollars, and in some cases, pennies. And so when you look at how to make progress on those 2 Millennium Development Goals, number 4 around childhood deaths and number 5 around maternal deaths, it all comes down to women. You've got to put the power in the women's hands. You've got to give them a reproductive tool so they can decide when they want to have those children, so they can naturally bring down their birth rate. And you've got to make sure they have these life-saving interventions, whether it's a vaccination, whether it's a mother learning that if she breastfeeds her baby exclusively, that will help keep that newborn alive. If we're going to make progress on those things, we have to go after the mothers, and we're doing that all over the world, but predominantly working with the Indian government in 2 states in northern India. We're working with the Nigerian government in Nigeria and also in Ethiopia, and we're seeing progress in countries like Ethiopia and Malawi who are really building out their health system and setting goals around these 2 Millennium Development Goals.
What about the agriculture thing? How did you get into involving women in agriculture? And I'll tell you in a minute why I asked, but go ahead.
Well, if you look at farmers around the world, the smallholder farmers, which is what most of the farms are in Africa, are very small, less than 2 hectares, and 70% of them are women-owned, women-run. And so you have to reach the women. If you don't get the women with the new seeds or the fertilizer or help them store their grain or get their grains to market, you're not going to make any progress on that number 1 Millennium Development Goal, which is cutting poverty in half. 1.3 billion people have lifted themselves out of poverty since the Millennium Development Goals were set. We can do a whole lot, but that's phenomenal. That's huge progress and huge impact. But if we're going to get the rest of that goal done around the world, you got to go after women.
Look, yeah. Let me just say, my foundation does a lot of work with farmers in Malawi and Tanzania, and I was out in rural Tanzania looking at this agriculture project we did, helping people grow corn and soybeans and process it. And the average farm was an acre. A couple of them were 2 acres. But all the farmers picked a spokesperson, a woman who only had a 1/4 acre of land. And she was a widow with 1 child. So all we did was help them with the seeds and the fertilizer and to destroy the pest, and then we directly marketed their products so they wouldn't have to go through a middle person. And this woman said that she went from an $80 income for a whole year, $80 she was living on, to $400, 5 times as much, just by somebody helping her to do what she knew perfectly well how to do. And she said, they picked me because my son is in school for the first time in his life. Because in so many poor countries, they have to pay tuition. And I think we forget about women's roles in economic development. And the other thing you said about family planning decisions, I think it's worth pointing out that as far as I know, the only unbreakable law of social development that seems to go across all religions, all cultures, all geographical reasons, is that whenever the girls of the world have access to school and the young women of the world have access to the workforce, the age of marriage and first childbearing is delayed and the birth rate goes down as a matter of course. So I really thank you for what you're doing. I think it's important. Eric, one of the big debates that we've had ever since we started this, one of the debates that you and I participated in back when I was president, long before we started this, was what could the technology revolution do for poor people? We started with, what could the technology revolution do for poor people in America? Should there be broadband in every rural county in America? Would it enable people to stay where they are and do business and all that? So why don't you start with Haiti, but tell us what you think all of us should be thinking about, why we should come to the sessions involving technology, where you think this whole thing is going. What can the technology revolution do? We have people here from Kosovo. They had a horrible war. They're now trying to grow their economy. We have people here from Bosnia, from Croatia, from Macedonia, from Guyana. We have, I could just run through. We have people here who are dying to accelerate the development of their countries. what is the role of technology for them? They finally ended the war in Sri Lanka. What are they supposed to do now? Now that the president here has ended the war, how does he prove he was telling the truth when he said, whatever your religion is, wherever you live, I want you to have an equal part in the country's future? President Talabani here is trying to figure out how to get the Iraqis to go from having an election to having a government. What is the role of technology in all this?
There's so much we can do now, but the starting point is always mobile devices.
Always what?
Always mobile devices now. There are more than a billion smartphones, more than 4 billion feature phones, as they're called. And they are the lifeline for information for many, many people in the world. What is amazing to me is how robust these networks have become. So even in Haiti and in Pakistan, those networks largely stayed up and served as a lifeline for rescue and so forth. In building a country, especially a country that's recovering from a war, I would start with trying to empower the citizens on an individual basis with these new devices. They're not expensive. They can be sourced locally, put up the towers, make it work. With that, all of a sudden, your citizens have access to all the world's information, right, for all the reasons that the web is successful. But more importantly, they can begin small businesses. They can begin to advertise. They can begin to participate in the broader conversations. All of a sudden, their world is no longer so local. Furthermore, when they're being fed wrong and incorrect information from the local charlatan, they can be corrected or they can get another viewpoint. It just changes their consciousness in a really fundamental way. Over and over again, this development of mobile devices is probably the single most important thing the Technology Center has done in the last 20 years, because it allows the world to be one world.
Well, let me ask you a very specific question. 10 years ago, 11 to be exact, when I first went to India, they were already trying to make a big leap forward with technology. And I was in this little village called Naila, and I saw what their commitment was. Their commitment was over the decade which just elapsed, that they wanted every town of any size to have in some centralized place a computer which had basic maternal and child health data on it in visual presentation and in the local language as well as Hindi. And they wanted a printer so that the poorest women in the country could have access to the same kind of maternal and child health information that not only the wealthiest women there, but the wealthiest women in America could have. That was where they wanted to start. And they said they could visualize having school books like that. Now, we're so far past that. So here's what I want to ask. I have a responsibility now to try to help the Haitians build their first education system ever. And not only to have them all in school, but to have being in school mean something. This is a big issue in Africa and Latin America, all over the world. You can put everybody in school, but they need trained teachers and adequate materials. Does the iPad and the Kindle, do they offer us the hope that we don't even have to have a traditional computer for everyone to access the world of information? And will it make textbooks irrelevant in developing countries so that we can dramatically accelerate the move everywhere in the world to adequate information for school children everywhere? And if so, how? And how can we afford it and bring down the unit cost?
So the costs are falling very dramatically. Mobile phones that have high-quality screens are now down to about $150, which is still high for a very poor person, but with buy-downs, and there are many, many countries, firms in Africa that are actually making profitable businesses selling these sorts of phones. India, by the way, which you mentioned, fast forward 10 years from when you saw that village, now has the fastest growing mobile phone network in the world, 7 or 8% a year, and it's just phenomenal. So in fact, prices are going to fall very, very dramatically. This is technology that everyone can access. And one of the issues in poorer countries, for example, is the physical textbooks cost too much. And they get lost and so forth and so on. But since everyone is fundamentally going to have one of these devices, all of that information will be repurposed in their local language and on that. So we can do a lot when we can talk to every single human being.
But if you were in my position right now, you're the co-chair of the Haiti Recovery Commission, the government has made the first commitment in the history of the nation to have universal school enrollment and to have cost not be a bar, which parenthetically, folks, will end 90% of the rest of it, the child bondage system there, once you get everybody in school and you don't have to charge the parents for it. Would you or would you not place textbook orders? Or should I be trying to ship them in to get them some sort of technology?
You remember 15 years ago, you did Net Day here in the United States, which changed American schools, because your position was that every school should be wired and have access to what ultimately became the World Wide Web. It's the same principle now. What I would do with Haiti, with respect to education, is I would get the schools wired with a simple enough connection that they can have a proper computer and let the students run it. Trust me, they're so curious, there's so much information available now, they can take over. They can really make the country a much better place. In our case with Haiti, we actually did low-level imagery to show pictures of the disaster and help finding all the logistics. So that information is there now. It's just not in physical form.
Everybody here, there are a lot of people here that are here for different reasons, but I promise you that all the leaders here from all the developing countries and all the people here who are from NGOs in the developing countries, this is something they are constantly struggling with. Even the ones who have universal enrollment may or may not have a universally high quality teacher training program and access to adequate learning materials. So any of you who have any ideas on this, not just for Haiti, but for all the countries here represented, this is really worth your input. It's very important. Were you going to say something about that?
So I just thought when I was listening to your discussion that, yes, of course, the modern technology is very important also to good education. But if I would answer, I would say that I would invest in the education of the teachers, because you can never underestimate the human resources.
Talk a little about, I want you to talk about the rest of the world and your work for women and girls, but first, there's a huge debate going on in America now about what it takes to be a successful country in the 21st century. And this debate is also going on in many other countries around the world. There's a lot of shaken confidence, a lot of lost arrogance in the aftermath of the financial crisis. But there was also a fairly rapid acceleration of inequality in the globe before this financial crisis, going all the way back to the time when we first, in rapid succession, the world went off the gold standard and created an international financial system before we had a real international trade system, much less international social system. And then we had the first oil price shock, which further skewed the income distribution levels in countries. And now we're having the argument all over again. What is the role of national governments in a global economy? How much government is too much? How much is too little? What is the right thing to do? And it's a big challenge all across the world. The United States has recovered 70% of its GDP loss since the bottom of the recession. Germany 60, Japan 50, but our income distribution is so skewed people don't feel it and we don't have new jobs. How would you advise people everywhere not to look at the past and blame the past, just to figure out, wake up tomorrow morning and figure out what in the living daylights are we going to do now? How do we decide what government should do, what the private sector should do, how to design a tax system, how to design our relationships with the rest of the world, how to define our obligations to poorer countries? How do you run your business? How would you advise all these people to go back home and start day after tomorrow or Friday when they go?
Thanks. Simple question. But in the matter of fact, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, he launched now the high-level panel of global sustainability. And we had a first meeting on Sunday, and I will be co-chairing that together with the President Jacob Zuma, South Africa. He gave a little bit more time for us to the end of the next year. But I think that the word is not ready then. The question is, of course, that when we try to get the sustainable development, what you and all this Clinton Global Initiative has been, so of course we have these different sides, economics, then we have the ecological side, and then we have the social dimension. And we have difficulties to keep all these three balls at the same time in the agenda. I'm, of course, like all here, I think you folks, we are all interested and concerned about the negotiations for the new climate change global agreement, and that's very important. But we have to also to work with the financial crisis in our countries, and then the people should live day from day, because after all, these are people. And that's why I think this is one of the problems. But we have to keep them, all these three dimensions, all the time in agenda. You mentioned already the globalization. I remember the time, we were a little bit both younger, then in the years of 2000, when there were a lot of barricades, people were against and for the globalization. And then 2004, United Nations decided that it should be the fair globalization, which could help the implementation of these MDGs. We have tried to do something. For instance, in this Fair Globalization Commission, where we speak very much about the decent job, American 3 members were from USA, and they were on board with this unanimous report. And for instance, then the gentleman you know, John Stiglitz, said already that if there is somewhere the weakness in this global system, it's an international financial architecture. And the other experts said the same. But we are human beings. We knew how difficult it is to change. And so now we have had all this crisis, and now G20 and the others have been ready to make the reforms we should do much earlier. So we cannot change the world in next morning, but it's not too late to start already today with all these three dimensions. And I do believe democratic states is an important actor. We need a business community, and then we need, of course, NGO, active people. And what I think is the best is that in many human persons are different type of the characters together. I took this scarf, Mary Robinson gave it to me, because this is for the maternity health and for the more broadly for reproductive rights of the women. And men and women who were yesterday in that meeting, we promised to give the strong support to that. So you don't need to be just a president. You can be also an activist, or you can be in business. And that's the best. And I hope you will remember that during the week. Okay.
Well, you may be right, but I'm glad you're still a president. I want to give you all, we have just a little time left, but I'd like to ask you to think about this. Melinda, you and Bill run the biggest foundation in the world. What is the most important thing you do that smaller groups could afford to do that would make a difference?
Well, I think for somebody who's thinking about having impact, I think there's a role for the philanthropic sector to play. And I think if you understand that role and you think about the impact, the goal that you've tried to set and the impact that you're trying to see along the way, if it's to have poverty, or it's to improve people's lives through agriculture and help them lift out of poverty, or it's to make sure that these 200 million women that don't have reproductive health tool that they want, that you get those tools out there. You have to know what your goal is. You have to set some measurement and impact evaluation that's going to happen along the way and make sure that's built into what you do. And you've got to surround yourself with a set of incredible partners, because at the end of the day, it's the partners that carry out this work on the ground. I mean, the work that we're trying to accomplish in the childhood goals and the maternal mortality numbers, you know, one of our partners is Save the Children. They're an incredible organization that learns on the ground. When I go to Mali and I am on the ground in the villages, I'm side by side with them, hearing what they've learned over the number of years they've been invested in Mali and invested with the government. The other thing I would say is you have to know that your dollars, I mean, we look like a huge foundation, but our dollars are tiny compared to what the impact we're trying to have. And so we have this catalytic wedge where we can take some risk out of the equation. We can work on those new vaccines. We can work on different vaccine candidates for the developing world. But ultimately, it's governments that have to uptake those. Large scale, you know, the donor nations giving money to a fund, but then working with the governments on the ground. I mean, we can only help affect change in Ethiopia in terms of those maternal death rates and the childhood death rates because the Ethiopian government has their own plan, and we're plugging into it, and we're helping them test some of their models. Again, we're trying to do, we'll take some risk and do some things they may not want to spend money on, prove them out. But again, they have to have their own governmental plan, just like Malawi that says, okay, if we're going to reduce our maternal deaths, we're going to get women into clinic. That is going to be a policy change we're going to make. So you have to invest with a whole series of partners and governments along the way if you're going to have impact.
I just want to emphasize two things she said, because even though the Gates Foundation has more money than other foundations, as she pointed out, they can't move the world. More of the money is either in the government or if it's something that's commercially viable in the private sector. And the thing that I've always been impressed with are twofold. Number one, I love going places with them, and Bill Gates and I did the International AIDS Conference together, and we sort of did Alphonse and Gaston on our speech. But people make fun of me for being a policy wonk, and Gates makes me look like I'm mentally retarded. But the point is, you listen to her, they always talk about the facts. Do you know how many political and economic decisions are made in this world where people don't know what in the living daylights they're talking about? They don't have a basic factual grounding of what is going on. I'm not saying there should never be any disagreements, but if you don't have as much money as they do, the facts are even more important to you. You can't afford to make mistakes that you don't have to make. There's plenty of mistakes going to be made because we don't know the answer. And the second thing is, they're always trying to develop a model approach that then hopefully some government will embrace. President Kagame told me yesterday, I was just thrilled that the work Paul Farmer and Partners in Health and our foundation did in 2 regions of Rwanda to build them a healthcare system in 2 regions that included not only hospitals but rural clinics and community health workers and everything. He thought it would work, and now other places wanted to build it all over the country. That's what you dream of. Those are the 2 things they do that I think are great. Partners on the ground to go national and have the government take it up, and a relentless focus on what are the facts. So when you spend money that doesn't work out, at least you're intelligently risking the money instead of dumbly risking it. I think it's really important. So go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say that I agree with what Melinda said, obviously, but I think in our case, making our purpose pervasive. In other words, if your purpose is to touch and improve lives, how do you make that pervasive in everything you do? You do it through your brands. So, for example, with Pampers, we work with UNICEF and over 100 partners to eliminate neonatal tetanus from the world. So far, we've been able to affect 100 million different mothers from neonatal tetanus. We've eliminated it from the country of Myanmar. But also working with government. We've announced that we're working with USAID, with the State Department, to provide 280 million of these 280 million liters of safe water for Pakistan.
What do those packages cost now? What do you sell them for?
Well, we're down to about 10 cents, including the delivery and on the spot. And fortunately, we have 100 different partners around the world helping us.
And that will clean up enough water to feed a family of 4 for how long?
Well, this is 10 liters, so it's about one day.
Dime a day to stay alive, not a bad deal.
I'm sorry?
Dime a day to stay alive is not a bad deal.
No, it's a great deal. And 4,000 children, Melinda mentioned this earlier, 4,000 children die a day from diarrhea or dysentery from unsafe water. 4,000 children a day. That's tragic. That should not happen today. And if we do this well, we can solve that problem.
Eric, beyond the cell phone revolution, which I think is clearly right, we have known for several years now that even before all the recent advances, before you could get all the stuff off cell phones you can, the benefits of spreading it. The World Bank came out several years ago saying that every 10% increase in cell phone penetration increased GDP 0.6%. I'm pretty sure it's higher than that now because you got so much more information. I remember when we were doing the tsunami relief, we gave all those fishermen, we put them back in boats, we gave them all cell phones, and they could call up and down the coast in India, up and down the coast in Thailand, up and down the coast in Indonesia. Their incomes went up 10 or 15% just because they knew what the pricing was. Nobody could take advantage of them. And they quickly figured out how to do it. All right, beyond that, what should all these leaders of developing countries be thinking about in technology? Assuming we'll just start with the fact that they want to get universal penetration in whatever form or fashion they can best afford. Beyond that, what's their next steps? What should they be thinking about?
So why don't we just take the objective that we want to create as many new jobs as possible in these countries? And I mean new jobs because of technology, because of what it enables. If you think about it, you start with a mobile phone, which is a basic necessity at this point. I need to know about my crop price or so forth. Well, and I'm talking about a more powerful phone over time. Let's think about information markets. Let's think about entertainment markets. Let's think about the social community. Let's think about all the jobs that are going to be created because people now have access to both local, national, and global information that they did not before. You fundamentally need to be interconnected, we think, to really be a significant economic force. And you can do this now, and you can do this, and you can take advantage of all the incredible natural intelligence and native knowledge that exists in all of these countries. That this will occur with a simple focus. Let's try to get as many creative people using the technology to create employment, and employment at any level. Even low-paying jobs use this because of their knowledge worker jobs grow in value. There's a lot of evidence that in many of the developing countries, the primary source of new jobs is in fact telecommunications because of this fact. Imagine every one of them is going to ultimately have an entertainment industry, local sources of information, et cetera. People are always focused on the sort of analytical part and the educational part. Let's create some jobs.
If in the coming election you were elected president of Haiti, and your job was to put the people back to work as quickly as possible, based on what you know, what would you do?
If it would be before elections, I would say that please elect somebody from here, from Haiti, because that could be a good person. But I can be an advisor. So I think that the things which could be important is, of course, is an open democratic society, the state where the citizens think that they belong to. That means, of course, fair elections. It means that we say not corruption, we say that it's not allowed to steal from the state or from the fellow citizen. And it means also that we try to make both the public work to go well and also the private sector. We would encourage them to be creative because I know that create a job in all parts of the world is difficult, but especially in developing countries. So we need both those who are creating jobs for the others, but also even the smallest entrepreneur then we should try to see that what might be those difficulties if somebody wants to become an entrepreneur. And then I would speak to the women. Women are half of the population, and they have used to work in the hardest conditions, and anyway, they have to look after the daily earnings and living of their family. I would ask that the president of Haiti, and I hope that it's not me, would also to have a good council of the women to work with him or her, and perhaps we could also ask some good neighborhood networking also. Why not? Don't try to look somewhere else. So the regional cooperation is very important. We have done it also up in the north in Europe. We have adopted in your system of this Clinton Global Initiative. We have gathered together the heads of the states and business and NGOs to make a clean Baltic Sea. It's much smaller problem. It's a huge problem, but it's much smaller than this poverty of the world. But it's not just the global or one state. It's the regions, it's a neighborhood. I hope all the best for the cooperation.
We're out of time, but I want to just ask, I'll give you a chance to comment on this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I want you all to think about this, because one of our big topics is women and girls. And recently, the Iranians released one of 3 people they were holding for espionage. We don't think any of them are guilty. They let the girl go. And we're thrilled, we Americans. And then they talked about whether they were going to stone a woman to death for adultery when her son was trying to save her life. And then they said, oh, maybe we won't do that. Is it really religious conviction, or is it believing that widespread belief that still exists in many cultures that women are basically property and entitled to less weight? The rise in sexual violence in the camps in Haiti. I know that most people think it's not much higher than it was on the streets in Port-au-Prince before. But is there a lot of that just because of physical weakness, or do people still really, is there a widespread belief down deep inside in many cultures that still men should have more significance in society than women? We haven't talked about that. We always talk about fixes and policies and all that, and I like that. And because we can't plumb the depths of the human psyche here, but it's worth your thinking about. Why in 2010 do we even have to have these sessions on women and girls? Why? Because I'll never forget when Hillary dragged me, we were in Africa one time, she dragged me into this beautiful hotel to meet with these women who'd come in from the country to talk about female genital mutilation, and the small, hardy cadre of men who were there supporting them, and how these guys were really at risk of being ridiculed back home for standing up for what today seems like the most normal thing in the world. I just say that because I think there is something that we can all do about that, and I think we forget this at our peril. There is still a whole set of complicated assumptions that rifle throughout the world. We have the Crown Prince here from Bahrain. One of the best things he's done to help women and girls is not related to women and girls. He established a commission to make economic policy for his country that was half government, half private sector, where women were fully represented. He didn't have to say anything about women and girls. People saw the picture. And thank you. Thank you. So, but I just want you all to think this. I mean, it makes me sick to pick up the paper and think about this young woman being stoned to death because somebody has made up some story about her life and saying it's just our law. It's not. There's still a lot of places in this world where women are part human and part property, and where men define their meaning in life partly by their intrinsic merit, and partly by their ability, no matter what else is going wrong in life, to control somebody else. And I think all of us can speak about that and talk about that and challenge people to think about what is truly going on in their minds and hearts, that this is still a problem in the world and that we have to come here and have a separate section on it. Otherwise, I don't have strong feelings about this. You guys want to say, thank you all. Let's give them a hand. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats and allow the heads of state and distinguished guests to leave the room. Thank you.